So we're on number 8, is that where we are?
I'll just read this down the list.
Okay, would like to restart our Planning Commission meeting.
This is a first. We've never had to have an intermission.
Thank you. We're going to reopen our Kaysville City Planning Commission meeting on May 25th. We took a short recess in order to reset the video, YouTube. We are now on item number 8, which is a public hearing and preliminary plat approval for 50 South 500 East subdivision located at 50 South 500 East and PRUD planned residential unit development overlay for Eric Wood.
Okay, to give an introduction to it, so just east of us here at 50 South, 500 East, the property, apologize, the property that sits here is just over half an acre, 0.56 acres, 24,000 plus square feet. There's an existing home on the property that sits a little bit towards the south, single-family residence. The proposal from the current property owner would be to access the rear of the property via a flag lot for a new single-family home. And so you can see the area, it's in the RD residential diverse zoning district. And the proposed configuration along the north side of the property, it's almost visible from the street now, and how you could kind of access it if you were to drive by 500 East, is a driveway would go along the north side of the property to the home in the back. There is enough space along the front of 500 East to allow the minimum lot requirement for what would be lot 1 and still have a 30-foot flag access to the rear property. The new lot would be roughly a third of an acre at 12,700 square feet. And the lot to the front, checking my numbers, still meets the 8,000 square foot lot size requirement, plus with the difference, they're both about 12,000 square feet in size. Making sure I'm reading my notes correctly, I apologize. The front lot, I apologize, would remain at 12,000 square feet, and the remaining lot would exceed the minimum 10,000 by a significant amount. And one of the considerations for the Planning Commission, again, the front lot would meet the typical standards for a subdivision that generally is just a formality and approval by the Planning Commission. But because of the flag lot consideration, it does require the PRUD overlay zone, which again, as was done in the last one, is a legislative decision, and it gives you the broad discretion to determine is the flag lot appropriate in this area. If the flag lot configuration is appropriate based on our reviews, the layout, lot sizes, frontage, and all requirements have been met, where the preliminary plat would be appropriate for approval. However, it's the Planning Commission's discretion to determine by a recommendation to the council if the flag lot would be appropriate. Of note, the flag lot, as opposed to a typical lot within the subdivision, has a 20-foot setback requirement from all property lines on a dwelling. That it's been put in place to kind of help create a buffer where it sits kind of in the middle of the surrounding properties that would be around it. Again, it is a public hearing, regarding the PRUD portion of the proposal and the preliminary plat as well. Staff's recommending approval of the preliminary plat. However, all that is subject to approval of the PRUD overlay zone, as the preliminary plat does meet the requirements of the PRUD. But, we're just looking at them both together. If there are any questions of myself, I'd be happy to further go into that and answer questions from the Planning Commission. The applicant will be present this evening as well to further discuss their plans, as well as the public hearing.
So the public hearing's on the change in to the PRUD.
And the preliminary plat.
And the preliminary plat. Okay. Any qualifying questions before we open the public hearing? All right, the public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here that's coming to address this item? Please come. State your name.
My name is Kylie Strain. I'm a homeowner that owns the property just behind where this flag lot would be, on the L shape. That's my lot.
Right here?
Yes. My only concern is if that lot was big enough and when, I know it fits the guidelines, but when we did purchase the house, we did mean to move to Kaysville with more of a larger lot community feel where there is gardens in the back. I mean, I don't feel like that's large enough. I mean, that close to where cars would have to drive completely into the middle of the block, next to the property. And the other concern is that it would just be a single residence, right? They wouldn't ever put a duplex or anything, right? That all single.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I can respond to at least the second question. So a duplex is not permitted on a flag lot. It would have to remain a single-family home. And based on the amount of frontage on the property, they can only get access via one flag. They'd have to have a wider lot to get a second flag for a second home. So it is limited to the potential of one
Limited to
home.
one. One. All right. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Thanks. Anyone else?
My name is Jaden Olson, and I own the property directly to the south of the one in question. My one question for the property, is there a height limit or restriction to the home that would be built?
Yes, so the height limit in the RD zoning district that is applicable to all the surrounding properties would be the same on this proposal, which is 30 feet.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Eric Wood. So I'm the one submitting this. Apologize, this may not be as exciting as the last one, but I figured I'd get out because I may just answer a lot of the questions people are going to ask. So, Lyle, I think when you had said it, so the entire lot is about 0.9 acres?
0.85 acres.
0.89?
Yeah, 0.85 acres. So I
0.85.
think I said 0.56 in my presentation, so I apologize. I'm reading my notes wrong, but 0.85 acres total. The front lot would be 12,000 square feet or 0.29 acres, and the rear lot would be over half an acre at 0.56 acres
Yeah.
as proposed.
Yeah, so, and then just a little background. So this is my grandparents' house that I purchased. So they were in it for over 50 years. My mother was raised there. I grew up as a grandchild coming to this house. So we love the house. It was built in the 40s. Our goal is to really make it our dream house. It's quite deteriorated right now. My aunt is currently living in it. She's a single mother. And what's happened is it's too much yard to take care of. The yard, if you'll go by it now, my grandpa used to put in hours and hours, and it was still too much for him. I run a small business, and so I don't have enough time to upkeep a yard that size. So the goal is to get the lot size a little smaller for my family to occupy, and then with the flag lot, build a home for keeping our fingers crossed that I can talk my mom into moving into from Las Vegas. So that's really the goal here with the lot. The whole idea is it's just too much land for us to take care of. So just a single family home in the back. It's going to be a modest sized home. And then we are going to make a lot of improvements to the existing home. The existing home will stay, but there'll be some work that we'd like to do to get it a little more current and up to date. There's a dilapidated shed back there that's going to come down, but really that whole lot, the idea, I mean, you'll see there's some beautiful yards around it. We want to be a beautiful yard. Right now it's not quite there, so that's our goal, is to get it there.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joshua Clark. Our family has been a generational family. I'm a third-generation resident of the property just directly west to. I'm a resident in the 35 South home. My grandmother owns both 35 South and 45 South. That being said, it is on an acre property, and I do know how difficult that can be to maintain. I work 2 jobs. It's finding time to do that is very difficult. My biggest concern would be, this is an area that I grew up in and love very much. very laid back, very quiet. And I love hearing kids out playing, because when I was a kid, we would go out and play. And this was the neighborhood to do it in. We go out and play in the mud and have fun, and when I hear kids out there yelling, screaming, carrying on, it's a wonderful thing. Packing houses into the middle of a block, and there have been other examples of this in this area, of building a home in the back portion of a lot, and it's largely reviled. A lot of people I know that this has happened to, the surrounding neighbors move. People who have been there for generations move because they can't handle something being in the middle. Now, I'm relieved to hear it's much different than what I'd expected, because you dream up the putting in duplexes and condos are going to put in a 4-story apartment complex, whatever. And keeping it all in the family is kind of the idea of this area. I believe my great-grandfather built the home on 45. He gave as a wedding present the property next door so that my grandparents had a home to raise their family. And someday I would like to have children and have them play in this yard that I grew up in, playing in. And largely, to that extent, it's a large investment. These are a lot of families, are generational families on this block. A lot of beautiful homes are on this block. People that have had these homes for generations have put a lot of money and a lot of love into. There's yards on this block that are won awards from the city council for how beautiful they are. That being said, money does speak, and I am grateful to hear that it is not for the purpose of making a quick buck, because too much of that has been happening, that they take something like this, they piecemeal it out, and then somebody makes a quick buck and ruins their neighborhood. Keeping it in the family is a big deal in this area. My first concern would be to the detriment of what would the negative effect be on property values in the surrounding properties. Having a home centered towards the middle of a block can be, and I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful home, but it's still a wall. You're still staring at bricks and windows. Has there been any study or any information regarding property values within that area, whether or not a home being placed in the center of a block would be largely detrimental or negligible?
I'll just speak at least from a staff perspective. A realtor may be able to answer that better than we can, but probably subjective and based on the property owner, whether they like that type of thing or not. I don't know if it does negatively or positively affect the property. It's difficult to ascertain what development does to other properties around it and whether it's positive or negative regarding property values.
Seems like when more expensive homes go in than the surrounding properties, then it helps people's values. It has to do with what sells, though.
Which has been very good, as far as I can tell. At least in this area, you haven't been able to buy a tin can for under $200. So property values have been going up, as have our property taxes with that, which I suppose is a good thing. I suppose it just feels like, even it being a beautiful home, still being in the center of the block, being the kind of neighborhood it is that you can have. If you want to have chickens in your backyard, you can do that kind of thing. You want to have a garden in your yard, you can do that kind of thing. Kids are running around playing in the yard, you can do that kind of thing. This is the white picket fence people are looking for. It's not dressed up. I mean, this is it. This is what people want. It would still be of concern. It would be something that it's kind of a shame to let something that having property in the back of your home like this is very, very valuable and desirable to a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you know who I am. Meanwhile,
Go ahead and tell us, just so we
this-
got the record.
I did. This is the one thing I came for. I mean, if we did something like this, then I think you're gonna see a lot more people trying to do the same thing. Is there gonna be a wide enough drive going down the side of that house to accommodate another person living there. Most places, I can name you a couple of them on Virginia Street that were owned by one person, and they had several lots, and I know one of specifically that a garage was built between the two houses, and then when the one person sold out, there's still contention about who owns the garage, who has to take care of it, and I think we're just going to run into the same kind of problem that we have right there. We're just, if we let this go, then you're going to get a lot of other people wanting to do the same thing in their yards, and we're going to see a lot of this stuff down the road. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Well, as far as flag lots go, I don't see this as being a really difficult or egregious example. But I think we've expressed over the past commission meetings, we're not real excited about the flag lot idea, but there is a zone, you know, the PRUD allows for that, and that's what the application is before us.
Can you go back to the map of the zones? So, I personally don't have a inherent problem with flag lots. In fact, I think the urban planners of the world think that generally speaking they're a good thing, because if we're going to attempt, albeit on a lot-by-lot basis, to curb the impacts of urban sprawl, one place we start is infill. This is infill development. And I think it's actually wise infill development, because we're left with two lots, one of 0.29 acres, one of 0.56 acres. So this back lot is going to be 0.56 is just visually still one of the larger lots, at least in this block and in surrounding blocks. And so I don't have a problem with it if there are going to be flag lots, if we're trying to follow our general plan and try to increase some density. Now, this is not dense. I'm not saying this is dense at all. But if we're going to try to infill, which I think at least is implied in the general plan, this is a logical place to do it. And so the proposal meets the code for flag lots. I think the code is drafted in a way to mitigate impacts that flag lots have, and therefore I don't think we need to do anything else other than approve this.
I can echo Commissioner Sunloff's sentiments to a degree. For the 4 years that I've been on the Planning Commission, I am certainly not a proponent and a fan of flag lots. I do understand they have their place, but you know, given the the unique character of central downtown Kaysville's residential area, which this definitely falls into, and keeping in the spirit with said neighborhood, I think that this is an acceptable use to subdivide the property. Putting a modest home in the back lot, in lot number 2, as Mr. Wood had alluded to. I feel that I don't see that as untoward. I think that's a good thing. I think it'll blend in fine. It'll blend in nicely, and I think it'll help. Overall, I think it'll help. Add to the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood. And, won't stick out like a sore thumb or anything. So that's my take on it. So.
I can see this is similar. This is 3 right there.
Yeah, there's stacked there.
I would guess if you polled the neighbors around here, I don't know. Maybe it's not a bad thing, but it's just a total guess. Okay.
Oh, it does.
Correct, these two are vacant lots. There's a home on the farthest east.
That is good information.
Well, it sounds like it's, has a nice plan. The owner sharing what his plan is seems to help the neighbors, and sounds reasonable.
It also looks from the size that I'm not overly concerned that suddenly this is going to become in vogue in the neighborhood and we're all going to put a house in our backyard. Just a quick glance, I counted maybe 4 or 5 lots that would be of adequate size to do that, just on this map. And I doubt any of them are in line for, I really hope they're not in line for our next meeting. But I don't think we run the risk really of
Many are
people
too
lining up
narrow.
to do that.
Yeah, to that concern,
have homes.
our office frequently gets requests, can we do this? And most of them are too narrow, and many that are even wide enough. The flag stem that accesses the back has to be far enough away from the house to allow the appropriate setback from the house to a property line. So you've got both a lot width and lot size consideration, plus the existing structure on that lot width and whether or not it would allow it. Technically, you could doze anything and do that on
Right.
some of those lots. And so that.
So this doesn't
becomes
tell the
big
whole story,
factor.
just looking at the lots is what you're saying, right? So in other words, that one or that one or that one, yeah, the dimensions might work, but the house on there may not allow
right.
for it.
So unless somebody's willing to get rid of a home to do it, something in the back, and I couldn't tell you which ones do or do not allow that, but it is a
Right.
frequent request that we get in our office of what can I do?
And that's why we have to look at each individual application.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we recommend approval of a preliminary plat for the 50 South, 500 East subdivision and recommend approval. Do we need to do 2 different ones, Andy? Rezone first. So I recommend that I move that we recommend approval of the rezone of 0.85 acres of property to include the PRUD at 50 South, 500 East.
Second?
Aye.
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 And then I move that we recommend preliminary plat approval for the 50 South, 500 East subdivision.
Second?
Aye.
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 Thanks.
Right. Next is item number 9, a public hearing and preliminary plat approval for Whisperwood subdivision located at approximately 650 East, 100 North, and PRUD, Planned Residential Unit Development Overlay Zone for Spencer Prince.
Property under consideration is highlighted here in yellow. It's at the top of 100 North, just east of 600 East. Our request is to develop the property into a 5-lot subdivision with access being served by a private lane. Zoom in a little bit. You can see on the map, currently there's a platted right-of-way that goes through the property here. The last city council meeting, the city council stated that they would vacate that right-of-way subject to final plat approval being granted for this project. So the right-of-way, if there's can be a plat that's found acceptable, they can utilize the right-of-way property. That right-of-way used to go all the way up to the Fruit Heights border. As development has occurred and property owners have found other uses for the property, it's been vacated down. So the vacation has been addressed. There are some issues. The one issue is that, as you can see, the highlighted area only goes to here. There's additional property back here that could claim access through that unbuilt right-of-way. So this proposal would need to include some way to restore that access back to that property. The one with the photo doesn't show the lines very well. The proposal is to do 5 lots. They all meet the R18 zoning, which is currently the zoning for the property. Facing to the west, served by a private lane coming off the end of the road. They've agreed to provide access to the properties behind that by giving them 30 feet so that it could be platted as a flag stem and make a flag lot back there if that was ever the desire of that property owner. This is, well, because it has the private lane in it, requires the PRED overlay zone to go along with it. Again, as Lyle mentioned on the flag lot, PRUD is a discretionary issue, does not have to be approved. So your job is to review this and determine if this is appropriate use of that type of development in this area. And if it is, then does this layout configuration meet the requirements and suit the needs of the property? So with that, we'll turn it back. This is a public hearing.
Quick question. I think you said a couple times we're looking at flag lot. Are you using that term advisedly, or is this a private street subdivision?
This here is a private street subdivision,
Okay.
which falls under the same PRUD ordinance as the flag lots do.
I see. Okay.
So unless there's questions, I'd suggest that we go to the public hearing.
All right, we'll open the public hearing. Please come forward and state your name and limit yourself to 3 minutes.
Oh, a few minutes, yeah, definitely. I would say good evening, but it's more like good night. So if I fall asleep, please somebody wake me up. Also, for the record, I am a Sprint user, and I appreciate the tower going in on that side. Thank you very much. My name is Curtis Cox. I live at 615 East Center Street. So on the previous pictures, you could see the tennis court that was up there. That's my property there. So right on the lower side. From the plot map, you'll see that 2/3 of the court would be going along where the road that's proposed is going in. The last third of it was going to be one of the lots. So my reason for being here tonight is an ask that if the plot is approved, that a fence that I'm sure you'll hear about later on, that would be going along the Taylor's property, which is the first house just behind the tennis court there. Yes, right there. There's a fence being proposed to go into that property. I'm asking that that fence be required to be going all the way down that road, all the way to the end of the road, which would then go along to my tennis court there. The reason being is the impact of snow and water. With the road being right there, I know that in requirements or CCERD, whatever they're called, to require where the snow gets deposited, any plow driver that's in a hurry can go along there and try to hurry and clear the road. That snow is going to get easily pushed into that tennis court, just a chain link fence right there. Every year that court gets filled with snow, and it has a slight grade to it that goes down into the Taylor's property, which gives a very unfair advantage to whoever's serving the ball on that side of the tennis court, but that's for another issue. But with the amount of snow that goes in there, any more added to it is going to cause quite a bit of water that's going down into the Taylor's property. Every spring, that fence line down there and their backyard gets saturated with water from that tennis court. It's just a huge amount of water that runs down in there. With a fence in place, at the very least, the snow is...
I'm sorry, you're saying it's running north?
Yes, yes. It's running north down towards that house. Well, I'm sure you'll hear over and over tonight how the water in that property has been an issue for many years. But like I said, any snow getting put in there is going to just add to that particular problem. So a fence being put in place at the very least would be piled up against the fence instead of coming into the property. Also, any pressure put on the fence would then, if it breaks their fence for the HOA, they're going to have to fix it instead of it being piled up on my chain link fence that now gets bent or whatever and may need to be fixed. Also, with all the driveways coming down facing towards the tennis court there, them snow blowing. We all know what happens with a lot of people when they're snow blowing their driveways. A lot of it ends up out into the road, and not into the side. So there's bound to be more snow going towards my property than what any rule would say don't do. So anyways, that would be my ask, and unless there's any questions, I'm gonna go help my son with homework.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Tom Pritt.
You can see the house.
I live south of this property, just across the street. 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago, we bought our home and enjoyed the Stewarts as neighbors for many years. You may be aware that many of the homes there on that end of Center Street were large lots. Many were acre lots, some more, some just a little bit less. We weren't in our home very long until we realized that there was an ongoing battle for Center Street between Kaysville and Fruit Heights. And they wanted to put the road through from Center Street on into Fruit Heights. And this battle had been going on for a number of years, and it came up about every 5 or 7 years before the council. We came here to these meetings many, many times to have this problem between the two townships resolved, and it never was until a couple years ago when, and we're very grateful to the council for their decision. They came up with a very good solution that allowed access into Fruit Heights, but not allow it to be a major road. And the consideration at that time was the narrowness of the road, Center Street, and the curve, and the abrupt decrease in altitude, the lay of the land. So, like I said, we were very grateful to have this problem resolved, and we thought we were done. We were living in ignorance. We thought we were done fighting for Center Street. When we bought our property, we bought it because it was a peaceful, single residential area. And to me, the community, the area there would be vastly changed with, I gather, the traffic would come out onto Center Street. Is that right? Would there be any entrance onto Center Street?
There is no entrance onto Center Street.
No entrance on.
That home is remaining.
There's a home, so
That home would remain there.
it would all be on to First North.
Well, then my problem is solved, actually.
We're glad we could help.
I was thinking 10 exits with 5 people, 10 exits per family. But anyway, I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for,
Okay, Gil Miller.
My name's Gil Miller, and I was brought out of bed by the last speaker. I'm just kidding, Tom. But that helped. I also own a home directly across the street south, right next to Mr. Pritt. And my only question is, I understand that there is no traffic access going out onto Center Street and that the home on Center Street is remaining. But is the creation of this overlay zone all the way out to Center Street absolutely necessary? That's my first question, because I'm worried about creep. And suddenly next year, someone will be in here saying, we want to tear down the house on Center Street, and we want to have the private lane go a little further and have it go out onto Center Street. And any entrance onto Center Street with 4 or 5 homes that is proposed, I believe, is totally unacceptable. Not to the residents. I'm talking about it needs to be totally acceptable to this group and to the city council. because of the actual way the road is structured at that point and the turn where it turns and goes due east, it would be a disaster. The street is already too narrow. So my only concern is that we're going to create some sort of an overlay zone all the way out to Center Street, and I'd like to know the reason why. If indeed the private lane is ending approximately here, why do we need to have an overlay zone all the way out to Center Street?
Well, actually, Gil, just stay there for 1 second. So, based on the plats that we have here, I mean, from my understanding of this, it looks as though where the L shape kind of starts, yeah, right there. It looks like that's where the property line ends/begins. If you're
You are correct. That's
Right,
where
okay.
this gentleman's property ends.
But
We
I-
all get nervous when we see yellow lines, though,
Right.
all the way out to Center Street.
Well, and I think Gil's question is a good one, because in the staff report, this is lot number 6.
It is.
Of the subdivision. So the question is, are we including lot 6 in the PRUD overlay?
Lot 6 does not require the overlay, and it would not be recommended that it
So it can
receive
be
it.
sequestered to
And I
1
would-
through 5.
All I'm doing is pleading with you to really seriously consider not doing an overlay for Lot 6. Thank you very much.
And that's appropriate.
Thanks.
What's that?
That's appropriate. It only needs it for the private lane. Lot 6 is only included because it's part of the original parcel. So the
Because
overlay
it's
could,
being subdivided, so it has to be included in the subdivision.
right, probably end up being a separate one-lot subdivision.
Yeah.
Hi, Sue Tice. I live at 633 East First North, so my front yard abuts this property. And I would like to know, I know that Lorraine and Stroh have been out to the property. Have you three gentlemen been out? Have you as well? So you've seen the lay of the land there and
Yeah.
seen how it goes?
Yesterday.
Okay. So the history of that area is pretty interesting, having, a very, very long time ago been a reservoir area. It's led to dramatic water issues in that area. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to download it onto a drive that we could see, but I have video of the water issues from December with my son in waders out there trying to mitigate that because we had horses on the property. We leased it up until the time it got sold. So I have grave concerns about the water issues there and how they could possibly develop. Can I borrow
I believe there's one up there, but you're welcome to it.
Okay. Over here, it's so wet. And the city came in and spent, from what I heard the other night, $30,000, I didn't know the price tag on it, to build a berm and put a gate, a drain there, and fix the gate that was over here. And even after that, my video is from after that, incredible water issues where water just, came way up. So that's a difficulty there. I don't take issue with development. The property, I think it can be developed, but it needs to be done responsibly and what's suitable for the area. I do realize that it's an R18 area. However, again, technically the 5 lots fits in the R18, but is it appropriate and suitable here? And so I really would like to quote some very specific things. Number 1, the city's general plan on page 4, land use, goals and policies, 1C, says housing development should have a minimum of through vehicular traffic and a maximum of open space. Pardon me. In Municipal Code, Title 19, under subdivisions, 1911, public welfare, any proposed subdivision and its ultimate use shall be in the best interests of the public welfare and the neighborhood development of the area concerned, and the subdivider shall present evidence to this effect when requested to do so by the Planning Commission. To move on to 1734-1, which is the PRUD section, under purpose. The purpose of the planned residential unit development is to encourage a better living environment. Further down in the paragraph, it says to preserve meaningful open space, and goes on steep slopes. This in particular, to preserve character and assure greater compatibility of new construction with the existing neighborhood. Going down to 1734-5, additional criteria. Number one, in considering the application for a planned residential unit development overlay zone, the following shall be evaluated. There were several things, but down in number B, letter B, excuse me, the relationship to existing and proposed land uses and circulation plans of the community, and avoidance of any disrupting element, disrupting element in the neighborhood. And then E, impacts on the privacy of adjacent properties. Then going down to 1734-8, private street subdivision, as you all know, no building should be closer than 20 feet to any street improvement. So there are several things in both our code and our general plan that speak to what should and could be happening here, its impact on the neighborhood. Now, and notwithstanding that, yeah, R18, okay, I can squeeze 5 houses in here. Is it appropriate? The water issue is unbelievable. And that puts a lane right next to my neighbor's house, a private street right next to my neighbor's house with 5 houses that the traffic would be ridiculous for what is definitely a dead end. Now, the city council said they approved based on approval of the plat. So they didn't say, yeah, we're going to abandon that right of way. And so the consideration is there as well. And another point that was made by a neighbor of mine, and it may be made tonight again, is that by the city abandoning that area over there, the only one it benefits is the developer, because now the developer can put more property on and make more money on it. It doesn't do anything for the rest of us, especially with 5 houses there, the water issues, and your own documents. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Valerie Briggs. My husband and I own the property at 775 East, 80 North. We additionally purchased 2 plats on either side of the Kaysville right-of-way. There's extreme water issues. I can't believe nobody's looked at any topography, any water, besides the developer, because he is the only one who stands to gain from this. Where he wants to give us right-of-way to prevent us from being landlocked, which I can echo all of Sue's information in your own codes and master plan, there's issues here. Does the city, it's going to incur cost to us. It's going to incur financial damage to us. The city should not be spending money because a developer thinks he can put that many houses there. We are very strongly against this. The Stewarts could develop that property a number of different ways quite nicely, and we're not opposed to that. But after watching what the Taylors went through, I'm surprised nobody here has learned from those mistakes. And we will be very, very upset, and Kaysville will have lost, all its historical value and purpose by doing this, because the only person that stands to gain is Prince. Everybody that lives there has something to lose, financially and physically. And I would appreciate it if somebody would really look at this and use some common sense.
Can I ask you a quick question? When you talked about the costs, are we talking about from water?
Well, I don't want my property landlocked. I've been told that wasn't an option. But, for every code, you have a way to wiggle out of it. There was a home, the Taylor's home was built in a detention pond. It's been on the master plan for years.
When you say landlocked, maybe some of us here might not exactly.
I own 3 parcels there.
Right. Give me 1 second, please. When you say landlocked, I'm curious to know if you can extrapolate and kind of elaborate a little bit more for those of us here that may not exactly know, the nuance of what exactly that would mean. So your home is the one that's there, right?
Yes.
And you own, can I see that pointer, please?
I own the piece to the north there. and that piece. And the Ashmeads are to the south.
So, yeah, your home here, you own this one, and this one.
No, Kaysville City owns the
Okay,
right of
all right,
way.
Kaysville City owns this one, okay.
Yes, and
So
we
you own,
have-
you own here and here
Yes.
and here.
And how do we get to that piece of property?
How do you get to which one? This one?
That one. There's no way for us to do anything with it if you allow Prince to continue with this madness.
How do you utilize that now?
Right now, we've been taking care of it for the city. We've been taking care of the water issues. You came to put a culvert in, which you filled it in with a bunch of garbage from the dump, which is dangerous and hazardous. Nobody at Kaysville seems to care about maintaining the water or dealing with those issues.
So I guess what I'm asking is, how is it gonna change if this becomes developed? You know, I'm just asking, if this becomes developed, how would your access to this particular parcel change from the way it is right now? Since the city already owns this property,
Yes,
and they're gonna own it regardless, so.
Our understanding, when we purchased it 13 years ago, we were given different information. We spoke with Andy. We were under the impression we wouldn't be landlocked in, that yes, we could ask to have that vacated and maintain that space ourselves and pay the taxes. Okay? You can take that away from us, and that's great, but that certainly is not in the public interest. It's not in the interest of this city.
Okay.
We could have a home there. We could let our son take over the big house, and we could put a smaller home up there. And I'm very concerned about the legalities of this whole process.
I'm sorry, I need to understand this better. So your hope is to have access from the road that's not, from
We
the
have
part that's not
access now,
vacated?
okay? I mean,
Right, but to that parcel?
yes.
If I could just, I think I understand where you're coming from, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'll do my best to restate what I think you're saying. When they own that parcel and that parcel, if this final plat were approved, in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy or Lyle, they actually will get that one too. It'll be one contiguous rectangle that's all theirs. But what they came into this, in their mind, understanding was they had access because the right-of-way comes all the way up to here. And now if the right-of-way's gone, in their mind, they no longer have this right-of-way, and therefore, in their mind, they're landlocked. Is that accurate?
That is exactly accurate. And the proposed right-of-way, it looks great on a flat map, but there is a creek, an open creek. All the
Yeah,
trees,
right, and that's up here, up in the northwest.
all along that north border of our property is creek.
Your property, yeah.
And very mature native trees that have been there since the Ashmeads owned the property originally.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We still have a public hearing, so we'll let others come in.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Amy Taylor, and we live in the home just west of the property at 636 East and at the top of 100 North. So I think the issues have been laid out fairly well, but what I would add to that is that there seem to be a lot of unanswered questions. Without the benefit of a geotech study or the help of a storm drain engineer or some other professional, we don't really know, because of the lay of the land, if the 5 proposed lots would cooperate with those kinds of recommendations that would come from someone other than, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure that we have been shown that material. And because of that, I wonder if the topography of the land would not allow for the city ordinances to be met with the placement of the 5 homes specifically on their lot and still meet the ordinances, depending on what we would learn from that type of a study. We also have not seen any kind of information, any cross-section data or materials that would illustrate the transition between our home and the property, which I believe, I don't know, but I believe has the most significant difference in elevation as it transitions. So those are just a lot of things that we have not yet been privy to. What we do know is that the city spent lots of money within the last 2 years to bolster the basin that is at the bottom of that lot that collects the water. And we also know that a road access does exist that the city owns that would allow for development in an appropriate way that could be balanced against the requirements of that piece of property. We also know that our yard is full of remnants of the city's attempts over the years to deal with the water. There's a large drain on the west side of our property in the front yard, and there is another on the east side, as well as piping that runs underneath the driveway to take the water that retains in that basin down to Lake Fiesta. Another thing that we know is that we purchased that property with the understanding that the city had a right-of-way, which would illustrate to us where the street was intended to go. So if and when the land was to be developed, we knew that we would either remain at the end or almost at the end of a cul-de-sac, because the city had their space where the road was dictated to go. And had I known that I was going to turn into a corner lot, that I was going to have the upwards of 50 cars a day coming in and out and beside the bedrooms where my kids sleep, the headlights pointing, the noise, and I would never have bought that piece of property. And so I guess the other thing that we know, in addition to the things that Sue referenced in the city code, is there's one more point that I wanted to call out. I do have a few pictures in case you weren't able to see what you needed to see of the land and the transition area that I was referring to. But in 1734-5, under letter D, I would ask that the commission would consider the impact of the road, lane, or driveway on adjacent properties, in addition to the other things that Sue referenced. So I just think that there are lots of unknowns, and for that reason, among some of the others, it would be difficult to support this request. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you for your time.
I also have something to say about this one. I'm Dean Wall again. The problem that I've seen that property in the wintertime. And two concerns that I have is I don't think in the city council they actually addressed all of the ways of trying to get rid of that water that's there. If the development is let to go in and we don't make specific things for getting rid of that water, besides just dumping it on the neighbors to the west, I think we're going to have a lot of, I mean, they're going to come back and then want the city to fix that problem down the road. We have that same problem out west where people have property that is soggy and they want the city to come out and put a pump in, which I think they've already approved, haven't they? To build the pump out here out west for the properties out west. I think they approved $350,000 to put in a sump and a pump to help alleviate some of that water. And I think we're going to run into the same thing here because that creek comes down there and it doesn't go directly into the drains there. And then that water fills up in there. And then the second concern I have is, does the city actually own that property that's the right of way? And I have a real problem with the city just vacating that. The city should be really selling that to the developer rather than just vacating it and giving him that property for that development. He's going to make quite a bit of money, and the city should be part of making that money rather than giving it away.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Dave Woolston. I live right next to the Taylors, and we bought that home about 11 years ago. And when we bought it in, and just a little history of it, when we bought it, the first thing that everybody in the neighborhood came over and told us that, did you know that your house will be flooded? Well, nobody ever said anything to us, so we didn't even know that was an issue. It was never disclosed to us. And the home had been flooded before, and quite severely in the basement. But then the city came in at that point in time, and that's when she talked about the additional drains, that's when they put those in to help it. That did not stop it completely, because Sue Tice has talked about being out there trying to clean the drains, and our waiters, and been out there many times with her husband. And we'd be out there in a heavy storm because it was starting to come into our property. And really what happens is you look at the very corner where the easement is for the road, just in that area and where you see the barn, that would literally just fill up with water. It would come across where the line is and then just fill everything up right up to where the Taylor's home is. That would just all be filled in with heavy, deep water. And then we'd go out in our boots and just clean out the drains, and that seemed to help it a lot. And I'd never have been flooded because of those new drains, but had to work through it many different times, so we went. Now, after we've been gone for a while, my wife and I, but the Taylors told us that while we were gone, they had another big flood, and the city came in again and did some additional work. That's when they spent another $30,000 to try to clean it up. I don't believe it is corrected yet. I really feel that it isn't. So the question is, what needs to be done if this is developed to make sure that doesn't happen again? Knowing that, I think to build a home on the very right-of-way there is probably not the smartest thing to do, because that's right where the creek is, and if that does become a problem, that's the home that will get hit the worst. And so I just think that the configuration, maybe they can solve the water problem, but what will happen to if a house is built right in that corner? I wonder if that's possible. And so if you just consider that, my concern's the water.
Great, thank you.
10 more minutes.
It never is.
My name is Michael Allen. I live at 610 East, 100 North. I live on the corner of the cul-de-sac on 6th East. I've lived there for 40 years. I'm a fifth-generation Kaysville person. I just retired. I've seen the whole area around my home and Sue's home developed. We put up with a lot of noise, a lot of dust, a lot of dirt, a lot of water, a lot of snow. I'm retired now. I just want to enjoy the cul-de-sac. Earlier, in the back room, one of you guys brought up how many cars would we have in the cul-de-sac if somebody wanted to teach swimming lessons? Who was that? Which one of you brought that up? You did?
Maybe.
Would you like an extra 50 cars in with that swimming pool or an extra 50 cars in at your cul-de-sac? The snow removal is terrible. I've lived there 40 winters. I've shoveled, or until recently due to my health, 80 winters worth of snow because I live on the south side of the street. The truck pulls in on the north side, backs up, pushes it up, backs up. By the time it gets to my driveway, in 83, it was from that wall to here, and the other side of the street had no snow whatsoever. I spent the entire winter digging out. The same thing's gonna happen to this gentleman's fence when you put that road in there. There's enough space, sorry, you Center Street folks, but there's enough space on the west side of the Stewart home to build the private lane down into there. If they want to develop that bad, let them do it from Center Street, not from my neighborhood. There used to be deer and pheasants and all kinds of neat things back there. Now there's nothing. On the south side of me, retaining wall. I would say prior to the homes being built to the east of me, there was at sometimes up to 12 feet of water on the other side of my retaining wall, overflowing 6th East. The city has done something about that, but I've seen that for 40 years now. There is flooding, it's bad. I don't have a basement. The houses sit 30 feet above me. To the north have sump pumps. I don't. These guys need sump pumps. Why would you need a sump pump when you're 30 feet above the creek? Because the groundwater is so bad. And you want to stick 5 more homes in there, possibly 20 more cars. You move back there. Let's put it in your neighborhood, not in mine.
I'm Ann Pritt and live right across from Stewart's on Center Street. No, you can't open up Center Street.
Why not?
Because the elementary school children go up and down and up and down there, and look at all the reasons why we didn't want Center Street opened up into Fruit Heights, and those are the reasons why you just can't open this up into Center Street. You know, the street is narrow. There are the elementary school children there all the time going to Burton Elementary. It would not be safe.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else for the public hearing?
Hi, my name's Craig Larson. I've been working with Mr. Prince on remedying some of these things that we have been told of, that we have done the research ourselves to look into. And I am a professional civil engineer, licensed in the state of Utah, Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, most of the western United States. And as a civil engineer, this is what I do, is we solve these issues. I do not doubt there is a water problem right now that can be solved. There are situations much worse than this that are solved, and by some science and good sound design and construction, these issues can be remedied, and it can remedy the neighbors' problems as well as meet all city codes. Thank you.
Anyone else before we close the public hearing? Okay, the public hearing is closed.
The applicant is also here. I don't know if he was waiting for after the public hearing or not.
Oh. Yeah, if you want to come on.
Sure, please.
I admire your commitment and tenacity. My name is Spencer Prince, and I'm representing the developer and partners in this subdivision. There's been a number of issues brought up, which we of course have considered, and I appreciate the opportunity to come before the Planning Commission. I've been able to talk briefly on the phone with some of you. Like to have talked more, but I understand there's only so much time in a day. Prior to the City Council, I met with each of the property owners that abut the property and then I also met with each of the property owners that are east of 600 East on 100 North, except for one that I was able to touch bases with by phone and then met at the council meeting. So I've tried to understand the issues that are going on. We're sensitive to these desires. I know that it's been a beautiful pasture for a long time, and I think if anyone asked any one of us, we'd prefer to live next door to a horse than a home. I do think it's reasonable to think that the Stewart family has a right to sell their property so long as the subdivision is developed in such a way that it conforms to the city standards. There's a number of issues. Let me try to just go down each one. First of all, the access issue on the vacation of the street. The property is a long and narrow property. If it were developed just from that street, it would have two lots that were over 265 feet deep. It would be long, narrow lots. If the road were developed through to Mr. and Mrs. Briggs' property, the property that they own on the north of the right-of-way, the city right-of-way, and the south of the city right-of-way, neither one of those properties are large enough to develop. They don't meet the R18 standards. So at any point that they wanted to develop, if they decided to, they would need to vacate the right-of-way as well to be able to do that. What we have suggested and offered, I can say that it was turned down, but we plan to do it. I don't think that they should be landlocked. I don't think that would be right or fair. We have a 30-foot, see if I can do this right, a 30-foot easement that runs along the north. We propose a 30-foot easement that runs along the north part of the property that would attach into their property. Within that 30 feet, we had offered to gravel and pave a private drive or a flag drive, and at the time that the property is completed or finished development, then we would deed that over to them. He had indicated he didn't want to have to join a homeowners association to get to his property. He didn't want to drive on someone else's land, and so that was something that we offered. That was not accepted, but that's what we offered. So we have tried to mitigate access to the property, and I think in a way that's generous in giving away a lot of land. Next issue, the water issues. There's no question that there's water issues on this property. There's been a long history of that with it. The creek is open from the Hates Creek Reservoir all the way down till it hits the property here. The city came in and enclosed the creek, which I believe helped a great deal. From what I've understood, from a question I asked Mr. Briggs when we were on the property, is that it is not flooded from where the creek meets that culvert. There is one issue that we intend to fix, should we be permitted to. At the end of the culvert, there's an open area of about 15 feet of open air, so the culvert does not go clear to the circle. At the end of that, there's a very fine grate. So it has, I don't know if it's 1/2 inch or inch by 1.5 inch holes. I've taken pictures, been there during many storms. The problem is anytime leaves from that open area gather on that grate, it backs it up. On one of the storms this spring, when I was watching that and came and took pictures, it backed it up enough that a small rivulet, and it wasn't very wide, was flowing down over here to the storm drain in the retention basin and just running down into that storm drain. What we propose to do, and have talked to city engineers and so forth, is that we continue that culvert and attach it directly in, closing that up so that no longer can debris fall into that area before the circle, and that would resolve that issue of that backing up. Having the stream enclosed, I think, has resolved a great deal of the issues. From what I understand from the neighborhood, when the retention basin was put in, when the retention basin was put in, it helped, but it did not solve the issue with the water problem. One of the reasons, I am not an engineer, but we will be hiring engineers to do so. But one of the reasons that I can see is not only the issue of that stream getting clogged there, but that particular culvert and drain attaches to the drain on the east of her property and on the west of her property. So when that retention basin fills up, all of the water from that retention basin is flowing through her property in the culvert below. When we do our retention after engineering and so forth, as Mr. Thompson has indicated, we have to retain at least that amount, plus anything that comes from the hard surfaces of the property. And what, depending on what they recommend, I would propose that not only does it, the detention, but then any overflow, if it were to happen, would go into the storm drain system here, so long as the engineering provides it. That would be a second backup. If the city requires us to utilize that drain, we would prefer to not send any more water down there, but if they require us, then that would be the third backup to that system, to the detention basin, and then have two separate overflows, each one higher than the other. There's currently the property, even outside of this detention, the low point is right here. So if there's any sheeting effect from the property, it does flow over onto their property from that. By the way we've designed the development and thought it through, the private drive that we would be putting in would create a physical barrier that would stop any of that from happening. So we believe that by doing the development, we will resolve any issues from this property affecting the Taylor's property completely. Through the engineering, which we would, well, let me just say, first of all, we would be doing a boundary and topography survey showing very detailed topography to know what that basin currently holds. And then we would also hire a reputable engineer licensed in Utah outside of our company to come in and engineer the detention and so forth. It would also be reviewed by a second engineer prior to going to Mr. Thompson, whose responsibility it is to make sure that what we do fixes it. So I believe that the water issue can be resolved completely with the development. We have to make sure that happens, or we can't get final plat approval. That's the purpose for preliminary plat, is so that we can start spending money to find out what the issues are and resolve those issues. We also can do other studies in as far as anything that is required by the city, as far as water studies and so forth, and we'll do so. We've committed to that. Can I see the development piece? The groundwater studies and so forth. Also, we have proposed to do land drains on each of the lots so that there's not an effect that runs over into any of the other properties. This is the drive that I'm talking about that would create the physical barrier for any water affecting this property here. We have taken the drive and bumped it out so that it meets the city ordinance of 20 feet distance. We also did that on purpose, orienting it that direction, not only because of western facing homes, which is nice, but also this design puts the homes the farthest away from the Taylor's home of any other design. If we put a side yard there, then it could be built within 8 feet of the property line. Ms. Taylor's home is built within 8 feet 7 inches of her property line. So it would be much closer. This allows for a minimum of 64 feet before the home can even start. My mouth is really dry, I apologize. And then if we were to do a backyard there instead of a front yard, in keeping with the R18 zoning, and I might say we're not changing any of that. We're going to design and build according to all of the demands of the R18 zoning, that is the underlaying or overlaying zoning for that area. But if we did a backyard there, it could be within 15 feet of the property. So in speaking with her in the number of meetings that we've had and on site, she said that privacy was the most important thing for her. That is one of the reasons we have done what we've done, as well as the fence that has been discussed here. Ultimately, as I mentioned, we will be in keeping with the city regulations for R18 zoning, with some minor adjustments as we've continued to look at how we can improve things. The average lot size of each of these lots will be 10,660 square feet, or 25% larger than the R18 requirement. Even the net lot size is an average 9,312 feet, or 16.4% larger than what is required in this particular zone. Ultimately, the building pad sizes will range from between 4,073 square feet to 6,441 square feet, and that with the CC&Rs allowing for a very nice home that will bring a great deal of value to the neighborhood and be a beautiful addition. I think that that's it. If there's anything else that I have not answered, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Great, thank you. Why don't you take a seat and we'll let you know if there's questions come up. Thank you. Okay, so it's time for the commission to consider this agenda item.
My name's Karen Russell, and I live just by the, my property ends at the tennis court. But the question I have is, why would you just give him that property? If you just give that to him, and the mayor even said that, that opens up to anywhere that's going on. Those people are going to come in and want you to give it to them. I think you should think about that too.
Yeah, and that's the planning commission isn't making that decision. That's the.
The answer to that question is, by state statute, if it's a public right-of-way, which this is, and we vacate it, we don't have the option to sell it. It's vacated back to the public, and it, by state law, goes to the adjacent property owners. So.
We're also building more road than we would be getting with that.
Yeah.
Private drive that there was road.
I just add one more thought. I appreciate Mr. Prince's reference to being concerned about my privacy. But I want to be clear that I would much rather live next door to a neighbor than a road. And I really just believe that without more information, the things that I would normally want to be requesting or mitigating or any of those things, it doesn't really seem like it's the time yet for that until we kind of know where we're going. And so I don't want to miss that opportunity, but I just want to be clear that I don't, he doesn't need to speak to his concern for my privacy when we're talking about the road.
Right, this is preliminary plat approval, and after this is when they would reach a development agreement that would resolve or address these concerns.
And that's when we talk about height and all those other kinds of things referenced in the code, right?
Sure.
Along the way, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, that's exactly what this is right
Okay.
now, is we would be approving a preliminary plat, which is essentially giving Mr. Prince a green light, if you will, to move forward with mitigating a lot of these issues that have been brought up here.
Plans to mitigate, right.
Yeah, plans to mitigate. And then a certain amount of time goes by after all of his engineering, after he spends all the money to figure this all out, and then it comes back to us for final plat approval, and we say, well, we like this, this, and this, but you need to go back to do this, or, that's the whole process. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. So essentially, what we're doing is making him a green light right now to get this figured out.
Andy, would you give a concise history regarding the water? What's the history from the city's institutional knowledge, and also in part of that, what were these recent efforts done, the $30,000 number that's thrown around? And a footnote to that question is, what was the long-term intent, or was it a temporary fix when you spent that money? Meaning the city.
My understanding is there has been drainage issues in this area. We look on the zoning map. This A1 zone here is the Haight Creek Reservoir property. Excuse me. That is to the Haight Creek pressurized irrigation system, so most water goes through a pipe and serves the farther west area of town with Hate Creek pressurized irrigation water. Before it was pressurized, it was open ditch. The overflow of that reservoir and some of the other facility goes through the ditch that's been talked about along that property line. And then it comes down and is captured into the city storm drain system at the end of the improved roadway. Based on what I've seen and observed and I've heard from the residents, the bulk of the problem occurs because it's an open ditch going into a pipe, and the inlet to the pipe frequently gets plugged by the debris that's collected in the ditch. At least in recent years, there's been no indication that it's a capacity problem of the downstream storm drain. So what the city's done is try to, well, first, anytime there's a significant rainstorm and the crews are out checking, they go and check this and make sure the drains are working. Obviously, that can't always happen, so they've put in an overflow right away, so we were doing it within our own property, so the water would have a place to store when the drain wasn't working correctly. They also put in a bypass pipe. As was mentioned, there was a system that ran through this way as well as one this way, so that when one got plugged up, there was the ability to take it the other direction.
So if I'm hearing you correctly then, while it has unintentionally functioned as a detention pond, it has not necessarily been designed as such.
That's correct.
And the reason why it has backed up or become a detention pond is because the pipe gets plugged.
With the history of backup, I mean, you were out there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about the culvert that's right here, the grate that's right there, right?
Yes.
Right.
And you're not saying, because I did, of course, I'm not an engineer, the pipe sizing here looks small, but what you're saying is your understanding is it's not a utility size problem. The size of the pipe's not the issue. It's just that it gets blocked.
No, that's what we believe, yes. As part of this process, if the subdivision's approved to go to final plat, we will require the developer to actually do that analysis and tell us how much volume of detention we need based on capacity of the system downstream.
So on other properties, any subdivision, whether it's this type or larger, at the preliminary plat stage, how often does the city, if ever, require more than preliminary engineering?
The city's process is to not require the developer to expend extensive amounts of money until he knows he can build a project if the engineering can accommodate it. So, simple terms is we typically don't require the full storm drain design until final plat.
And so in a sense, bringing it back to this one, I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, is any developer, Mr. Prince in this case, or his partners or whatever, expend a little bit of money that's at risk if they have an option on a piece of property, expend a little bit of money at preliminary plat. If the preliminary plat says, yes, we will approve the preliminary plat, subject to making it actually work engineering-wise and other concerns, then they spend the money that still may be at risk because ultimately final plat could be not approved, and or they might say, whoa, this is way more expensive than we thought, and then they lick their wounds and walk away with their empty pocketbooks that they've put at risk, or all the issues get solved engineering-wise to the city's satisfaction and the planning commission and the city council, and then the project gets built. Is that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Or, I suppose a third viable option is the final plat comes before us and we say, well, this isn't right or this isn't right. So what happens is, assuming here, thinking out loud, the developer would then have to expend more capital in engineering and design and research and all that, bring it before us again, right? I mean, you can go back to the well a million times till you get it right, or you abandon the project altogether and say to hell with it because I've spent.
The other possible scenario that doesn't happen very often is they get a preliminary plat approval for the plat that they submit that they want to build initially. They go start doing the engineering and find out that it's not cost effective to engineer the solution that makes this plat work. Then they come back with a new preliminary plat and start over.
Well, and part of my consideration here is the possibility that this process we're going through and we're anticipating could actually make things better. Not only do we bring in another set of eyes and another engineer or two to look at it, but we also bring in another pocketbook that has an incentive to create a drainage system that works, and then the city oversees that to make sure that it's going to work. And it may be that this kind of process that we go through could make this better for the owners than it exists currently.
Yes, sir.
At least from the water perspective.
Right.
Well, and actually, I mean, along the way, I mean, to look at this on a positive note, I mean, it could end up being, you know, a win-win for everybody, for the adjacent property owners. You know, you get all of the engineering right, you get everything good, there is no more flooding, there is no more water issue. You know, everything's straight and true and correct. You know, you spent, you know, literally, I mean, I am an engineer. I mean, you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineering to make this all right, make this all work. You know, as a result, developer comes in and puts, I mean, Christ, I have so many notes here from today. We build houses that are to the tune of 4,500 to 6,000 square feet. I mean, it doesn't take much math to figure out how big of a home that is. What happens with that? Well, I think we all know that property values of all that adjacent certainly will rise. You know, I mean, of course, that's a best-case scenario with, you know, all parties winning, but, you know, you can think of it that way too, I suppose, so.
Well, I don't want to get too excited on the bandwagon here, but I think I have notes here that although there's a problem with the landlocked issue, but again, this development may solve that problem, and I don't know. I mean, I can't predict the future, and I don't make this decision, but I don't understand how that problem gets solved otherwise. I mean, the city's not, obviously is not planning on making that a through street, so.
Yeah, what was the city's plans with that just abandoned, in effect, right of way?
They had no plans.
No plans?
No, it was there. It was an old pioneer right-of-way.
Unusable?
That was never improved. Years ago, when it went all the way to the city boundary, it was discussed that it should have gone on into the Fruit Heights area and provided additional access.
With an actual road.
Yeah, with an actual road that went all the way to wherever it needed to go to. Fruit Heights had a different vision and approved a subdivision that put a house right on the end of where our right-of-way ended. So as the property to the east of here developed, there appeared to be no use for that right-of-way as it didn't go anywhere, so it's been abandoned as requested from the east down. This is a little bit different because now we've got a property that's the end of the road that is currently not interested in doing anything, and so we're skipping one. And so it creates the issue of how does that property be accessed? As was mentioned, there are some issues. The two lots that they do own don't meet the zoning for the area, so they're not currently buildable. And they would also have to have improved access before a building permit would be issued. If they wanted to build a house today and this development wasn't occurring, they'd be responsible to build the 55-foot right-of-way public street to their property.
And that's required of all developers?
Yes. We don't build homes unless they abut a street, either a private street or a public street.
The city doesn't pay to improve public improvements to facilitate development.
That's
Developer
correct.
pays for it.
That's correct.
So if I could just maybe flesh that out a little bit more, can you go to the one where that has just the property lines a little better? Yeah, I guess this one works if you zoom in. But so again, that's the Briggs, that's the Briggs, that's the Briggs. If I heard Mr. Prince correctly, he offered to not just give an easement, but to deed 30 feet along this property to the Briggs, which will mean they have this contiguous parcel. How much?
Pave it.
Oh, did you say you would pave it?
Yeah. Gravel it, pave it.
So I don't know if the Briggs fully understand that, but they're getting that parcel, which they didn't have before. They're getting a improved 30-foot access to their parcel, which is in a sense now just a flag lot that's ready, made for you to build on, Miss Briggs. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the property.
I went out there.
The elevation is an issue.
Well, you were going to have to deal with the elevation regardless.
Because I've been told by Mr. Prince there's no water issues, but then I've been told he can fix any issues.
Well,
I'm very concerned about this being done properly.
And as are we. Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think we are too. But what I'm saying is, you are going to have to deal with water issues. If you want to put a house on here, which is what it sounded like you wanted to do, you're going to have to deal with those water issues regardless of Mr. Prince. He's saving the day for you, is what I think. And I didn't realize this when I came out there before, but as I think about it, he's going to pave this for you. I'm not obligating you to anything, Mr. Prince. I'm just saying this is what I'm hearing. He's going to pave this for the Briggs. They're going to get a piece of ground that was separated in the past. Now it's all theirs. And they didn't have to pay, you don't have to pay for this, right? You just get it. And it's ready to build a house with a 30-foot improved access. After the subdivision goes in with Mr. Prince. That's all part of it.
Right.
No, the developer has to pay for that, right? I mean,
Right. If they want to improve this property, you know, they could, I'm not saying, we're not negotiating this deal, I'm just saying that this sounds like a pretty possible solution that is a win-win.
but that's what it, it's not an access easement, is it?
There's no flood control easement.
No,
There's no formal easement.
There's no formal easement, is what he's saying?
The water's been running that way for 100 years.
And it's not the Briggs' easement, it would be Hate Creek's
Yeah,
easement.
This right here.
Yeah, that's stuff that I don't know that's our concern right now. But what I'm saying is, again, I'm not negotiating this deal for anybody. I'm just saying that it sounds like there is a workable solution here for the Briggs issue. I'm just talking about the Briggs issue with the landlocked question. I'm concerned about that. I think there's a solution there. I'm concerned about all the water issues that are going on right here. It sounds like there is a solution. We've had Mr. Larson say that he can solve it. I'm confident he can. Whether Mr. Prince has the money or is willing to pay for that solution is a different story, and that's not our question. That's Mr. Prince's question to answer. But what I'm saying is, at a preliminary plat, it sounds like the problems can be solved. And we get to review it again at a final plat to see if they were solved. Is that true?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I feel like ready to recommend approval, subject to the issues being solved to our satisfaction.
What about?
Well, I'll address that. This property is less dense than the zone allows. What he's proposing is less dense than the zone allows. And so that question was answered a long time ago when this was zoned R18. And I understand that that's a concern, but it's not adding any more than the zone already allows. So.
Jesus Christ.
I get that it's not putting on any more than the zone allows, but in the municipal code, it talks about impacts. It talks about impacts on privacy of adjacent properties. It talks about compatibility of new construction with existing neighborhood. So that's where it gets past, okay, we've got R18 and we're just going to do it because it's allowed to be done. None of those other things have been discussed. You're just talking about the letter of the law and not discussing your own municipal code that allows for things to fit into the existing neighborhood.
And so the other issues, I guess, would be privacy. There's grading issues along here, the Taylors. I think that that needs to be solved. I think that privacy issues need to be addressed. Those are things that I think can be addressed, in my opinion, with a solution that gets brought back to us at the final plat stage. I think those are valid concerns, that there is a road right along here. I think the buffer is a step in the direction of solving that. I don't know if it is the ultimate solution, and I don't think we have to say that it's the ultimate solution at the preliminary plat level. But I agree, those are very important considerations in the code. Compatibility, best interests of the neighborhood, encouraging a better living environment, relationship to existing land uses, impacts on privacy, all of those things. What I'm saying is I feel like they can be addressed. So we're saying it looks like they can be addressed. Go address them, bring it back, and let us look at it again.
And I have a question about that too for Mr. Prince. So the placement of the private road, was that just what seemed to work best to accommodate the 5 lots, or did you ever consider any other way that the road would go and maybe the homes would face east? Tell us about that.
We actually considered a lot of different issues. One of the main issues that the reason that is done is the natural slope of that land is sloping towards the neighbor. So it's already sloping towards the west. You put the road on the east, you're going to have backyards that are going to slope away from the home. Mm-hmm. This creates a directed waterway under the street to direct it to a detention basin. So it creates a physical barrier, it creates the waterway, and just a number of reasons that went through that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it sounds like the homeowner right there is quite concerned about a road. And you've talked about a fence right along the road for privacy and...
We've actually talked about a number of things, but I have never received I'm okay with that from the homeowner. So yes, we desire to make this work, and we will continue to strive to do that.
And just for my fellow commissioners, my main concern coming, besides wanting to hear the main concerns of the adjacent property owners, is for sure the water. And so in my non-engineer mind, I'm just wondering how you take a basin like that and put homes in it, you know? But I suppose, like you've all said, that's why we always deal with a preliminary and then a final. Which
I agree, and I think, like Josh said, I believe all of these are solvable. Some of them maybe very simply, there's a concern headlights are going to be shining in my kids' windows. There's fences that solve those, that increase privacy, but that's not what we're trying to decide right now. That's not what we're trying to do right now. We're not trying to solve that issue. We're trying to look and say, that's an issue that we believe can be solved. Mr. Prince, go and solve it. Preliminarily, I think it looks like that can be solved. Now, he might not be able to. He might not be able to solve the water problem. He may not be able to solve any of this stuff for the right price, because it all still comes down to that. You can solve any problem eventually if you want to throw enough money at it, but it may not work. But a preliminary approval, I think, is probably appropriate, and then he's got to go solve these problems before final approval is given.
So a city council member who reached out asked, or just said, I wonder if the city ever requires an engineering study first before approval of a preliminary plat, and wondered whether that is an option for us.
I think we already asked that question, and Andy's basically said we don't do that. We
that's
we
what I
give them an
thought,
idea,
so.
and I don't think we have to do that. At this preliminary plat level, ultimately, we absolutely have to do that. And that's what the city normally does.
Okay, well, I just wanted to throw that in there. That was a question from a city council member, too.
I have one more thing that I wanted to bring up. The people that are going to be landlocked back there.
They're not going to be.
No. The problem is what Dave Adams was saying, that sewer and water for them is not going to be a viable option. They'll get a road, and according to what he said in city council meeting, it'll be a 30-foot easement that they'll have through there, but they'll only pave 20 feet of it. But the problem is them getting sewer and water from that property if they develop it.
But but whoever owns that property to develop it pays for that development, right? I mean,
Well, I
it's
understand
not,
that, but
it's not this owner's.
where the road's going is where the river is, or where the stream goes down, and that's not going to give them room to put sewer and water.
If you intercept their ability to access sewer and water, you landlock them. The road is so blocked.
Yeah.
We can verify that a lot can be accessed by utilities.
Yeah,
That's a simple.
Before final plat.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a problem that needs a solution that we're saying go solve. Okay.
That's what this whole
That's a concern that I have, is because, I mean, in city council, he said it'd be a 30-foot easement, but they were only going to pave 20 feet of that.
What I heard him say today was, I don't care what he said at city council, he said he would deed it to them.
Yeah,
That is
30 feet.
their property.
Right.
No
but it's
longer an
on
easement.
top- It'd be on top of the culvert to divert that water.
So it's on top of a storm drain like every other
Exactly.
city street in the city is.
Well, yeah.
I'm ready to make a motion.
And I just have one other clarification, also for Andy. So the property that is the lowest, the Taylor's property, and when, I mean, it passed all of the engineering as well to be able to be built, but then they've still had all these problems. And so I'm sensitive to the confidence of that property owner in particular, that, so we'll have all these other engineering studies, and everyone hopes that it really will fix the problems that already exist. It'll make it, the problem go away. I don't know, what confidence could we give that particular property owner that even though things passed engineering and that property was built and they've had a lot of water problems still, that they're not going to be the low-lying continuing problem? Does my concern make any sense?
I understand what you're saying, and that's a concern.
It's always, yeah. I can understand, a real concern there.
Nothing's 100%.
Right.
We don't know how big a storm we're going to get.
Right, yes.
Next year or 20 years from now.
Right.
We can use the criteria that's been established, the methods that have been created by people who are much, much smarter than any of us here, and the state-of-the-art technology that's out there, but that's still not 100% guaranteed in any case.
Yeah.
So in my closing remarks, from what I've heard from several members of the audience, is in not so specific terms, we're not so opposed to development as we want to ensure that it is done correctly, that T's are crossed, that I's are dotted, that everything is up to snuff, and that everything is correct. I think that's a fair assessment. This process right here, the preliminary plat process, as we previously discussed, essentially tackles that specific issue. The issues that are brought up with water and topography and grade and access and easements and the PRUD overlay zone, which will not be extended to number 6, which we can put that in there. And other things. We approve this preliminary plat. Mr. Prince and his engineering staff go out and try to solve all this, and we come back and we see where we're at. Does it pass muster? Is it gonna make everybody happy? Of course, it's not gonna make everybody happy. I mean, Christ knows that. That's impossible. But is it gonna make things better for the community and stuff? And then to Sue's point, you start taking in the aesthetics of things and the character of things, and how are we gonna build these houses, and what are the houses gonna look like, and are they going to blend in with the existing neighborhood and things along those lines. And of course, the developer's going to have to be sensitive to those things too. And I think at this point here, I think what's before us is we're not giving a rubber stamp that says, you know what, Mr. Prince, you have carte blanche, you can do whatever the hell you want to, you can build whatever you want to, and just you go to town. That's not what the issue is right here today before us this morning. It's, I thought I'd never say that at a planning commission. That's good, man. That is good stuff. Anyway, so I think what we have here before us is we have an opportunity to approve a preliminary plat. This has a litany of issues and problems. We all know it. We, turn it loose, see what we can come up with. He comes back to us in a month or 2 or 3 or whatever, however long it takes, and we reconvene and we see how things are. So I think that's kind of where it sits right now in my eyes. So
I agree.
I think there are lots of problems, and we want to find out if they're solvable.
Exactly.
And maybe
I think
that this will
exactly
be,
where we're at.
at least we'll solve the problems that heretofore have not been solved.
Right. So.
Josh, want to give it a try?
I recommend that I move that we recommend a rezone of 1.34 acres of property to include the PRU overlay zone for Spencer Prince at 650 East 100 North, with the conditions that the final plat comes up with a solution for our review regarding the easement to the Briggs property, that it addresses adequately and adequately handles to staff's approval of the storm water problems, that it comes up with a solution for privacy along that western property line all the way through to at least the tennis court. Is there any others that I?
PRUD overlay zone does not include.
I'm going on plat stuff, aren't I?
Sorry.
Fencing,
Okay.
snow removal.
Well, so that's all plat stuff, right? I need to go PRU or rezone for the PRU. Did you get all that, Anne-Marie? Okay, so let's go back, put a period on the recommendation for the PRUD. And then I think we vote, right?
For a second.
For a second.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I don't know where we started.
I think it's
Lorraine.
Okay, I'm just going to explain my vote that I'm going to go with that the topography is still concerning me, and so I'm going to say nay.
Aye.
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 I'm going to bookend Lorene. I'm not really excited about this project. I think it's got a myriad of problems. However, I think ultimately it may benefit the neighborhood and solve some of the existing problems. So I'm going to vote aye.
And then I move that we recommend, I move that we recommend approval of the preliminary plat at this project with all those conditions that I was articulating earlier. And is there any that I missed?
So we talked about snow removal, which is a little, the fence.
Yeah, I think that is captured with the road and the fence along there.
And can ultimately require it all in the final plat approval anyway.
Yeah, and so that will all come back in the final plat. And I guess as part of the engineering, if the city staff feels it's necessary to adequately address the engineering issues, things like a geotechnical report be required. So I'll sort of leave that to the staff to decide. Is that clear enough?
I'll second that.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Okay, I have an agenda somewhere here. I think we're done with the, I think we're ready for a call to the public. If you haven't had a sufficient opportunity to address the commission, please take that time now.
Will we be notified at every step when you're considering anything that has to do with this? Or are we just going to have to be vigilant as to looking at every single agenda
So
from
we'll
now
have
until whenever?
We'll have the next time it comes before us is a final plat, right? And that gets noticed the same way that this one does? Or more?
No, it doesn't, because it's not a required public hearing.
Oh, okay.
But there's still.
Yeah, so generally, unless we get different direction from the council, a final plat would simply have a notice published on the property. So watching agendas or keeping in touch with us.
So they'll be like the yellow sign, is that what you mean?
It's possible we're given different direction to do additional noticing based on some direction we're
So
recently
you
receiving.
could ask the council for
But-
additional notification again.
That would be wise. Okay, thank you.
Did you put in there that drop to 6?
Yeah, but
Because
you're not
you don't
paying-
have a road.
You're not paying anything right now.
How can he deed an easement that he doesn't know?
Nothing's happened yet, ma'am. Well, this is all hypothetical at this point. Nothing's happened. There's no, if you drive out to your property, there's no road there. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like a smartass or anything, but I mean, you're not paying any more taxes right now. You're not, there's nothing, nothing has changed right now. It's still all the same, it's the same as it ever was.
But those are valid concerns.
Of course.
They'll be forced to pay to maintain a road.
But right now, you don't have a road to that property, right?
Right, you don't.
So how do you,
Being offered an easement that the city owns from a private individual, I do not.
You're also being, you're also being given a chunk of land, too.
That I will have to pay heavy taxes on.
Well, would you rather have it the way it is right now? Would you rather have it the way it is right now? I mean, I think if it were me and the city's gonna give me land based on the development that's happening adjacent to me, I'm not gonna punch a gift horse in the mouth. I'm probably gonna say, wow, all right, well, I'll have to pay a little bit extra taxes, but at least I have a contiguous, group of land here that I can actually do something with, whereas before, I couldn't.
I'd like to know what the guarantee and the proof is that when he's deaf and gone and there's problems, I just come back to you.
Well, nothing's changed right now, though, either. So, I mean, I'm talking about hypothetical things at this point.
it's not relevant.
Did I miss it, or did Lot 6 get excluded from
Lot 6 is
development?
excluded, yes.
From the PRUD.
What's that? It wasn't in it? That's what I thought, but I didn't address that.
Lot 6 will not be in the PRUD overlay.
Right, Lot 6 will not be in the PRUD
Not in the-
overlay
Great.
zone.
Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Welcome. We gotta go through the rest of our agenda.
Okay, so
Is that the end
We'll
of the
consider the
public
call the public
That was it.
over. And next we'll go to reports, calendar. That's you, Lyle.
Wake up over there.
Yeah, knock, knock.
Knock, knock.
Okay. Still awake. We've got just one code interpretation to get some feedback from the council on.
Oh, yay.
Um,
I'm interested in.
So,
Solving this
coming
issue.
up very soon is campaign season again for elections, including local elections. And this is an excerpt from a letter that has typically been given to candidates regarding political signs. And we always have a lot of fun with this every year when those are put up and how to regulate them. And we had a request on one in particular that I wasn't sure specifically if it was an issue or not. And so I figured maybe the best way to get an answer would be to go to the commission here and get some insight. So it simply says signs can be placed within Kaysville City. Please remove them as soon as possible, but the signs cannot exceed 32 square feet in size and 6 feet in height. And so generally that's pretty straightforward. You have a sign posted in a lawn, can't be more than 6 feet tall. But the question was if it's attached to a building or placed in a window, what is height? Our ordinance doesn't define that in relation to a sign. What it does instead is it has different sign types. So you have a campaign sign or political sign, or generally something that would be in a window would be considered a flat or wall sign or a window sign. And so just probably different ways to look at it. If there are concerns of the council, is it a campaign sign also a wall sign or also a flat sign? Or are they two separate things that we shouldn't let people put them up against a wall or on a building, if that's what you believe the intent of the ordinance is?
I understand your issue, and I'm not sure I do at this point. And not because you didn't say it well, I'm kind of tapped out.
It's pretty late.
If it is a political sign, then it has to meet, then it meets those requirements, and the fact that it may be something else doesn't release it from those requirements. That's does that make sense?
I think the primary issue, I think we can say 32 square feet still applies.
That's pretty straightforward for us.
But how do we interpret the 6 foot maximum height?
Whether
If I
it's
put it on
ground-
a window that's whatever, 10 feet above the ground, does that then not meet, or do we paste it to a wall that's 10 feet above the ground? Is that still in compliance or is it not in compliance?
Yeah, I think that needs to be changed.
I think that's the only real question.
Yeah, that's the question, so.
I mean, why the height requirement? If it's 32 square feet, I don't care if it's floating in the air. I mean, why do we care about the height again? I mean,
I kind of care.
it's 1 o'clock.
Well, but that's what we're dealing with. He's trying to say, how do we interpret that, right?
Oh, we're just asking.
Yeah, if it's a freestanding sign, that's pretty obvious, but once it's on a wall or other structure, where does the height begin and start? So if it's a 10 square foot sign,
We don't
2
want
foot
somebody
by
putting
5
a
foot.
10-foot pole in the ground.
But if that 10-foot sign's in a window that's on a second story, is that then above that height? So I think there are probably different ways to look at it, but we just want to make sure we're applying it fairly to everyone who's
Mike-
going.
Why attorneys and judges have jobs, right here.
Well, but I mean, so it seems like to me we're asking about how do we interpret, or do we need to change this, right?
Maybe some of
We
both.
don't change it, but.
I think
Point, we're just
immediately,
asking for interpretation.
yeah, June 1st is when things start, and so this is coming around before we'll have time to change it. And I think as long as it's applied fairly and equally in a manner that's not going to be detrimental aesthetically to the city, then there's probably different ways to look at it, and we just want to make sure that we're going with appropriate direction.
My way of looking at it is that I believe, and I heard Gil Miller say the same thing, signs, it's kind of an unfortunate thing that we have to deal with, is those signs for as long as we have to deal with them. They clutter up a city. They don't help the city look nice. And
Help people win elections.
right, so they are a necessary evil. However, there are things that other cities have that Kaysville does not have, which is a set date they go up and a set date they go down, or, this is the week they go down, which would help. I actually sent an email into the city a couple months ago, a while back, asking about this. I know that in Bountiful, it is a limited amount of time that they can be up. And I think that's great. And I also think that if signs are allowed to, be up on things, and it's just more clutter, more strange stuff. So I am all for some boundaries for political signs, and I have opinions on the timing of that as well.
So if I am putting on my statutory interpretation hat, I'm going to say that I think the reasonable interpretation of this requirement is that it's not saying that there is a hard 6-foot cap at every level of grade on a piece of property. What I think it's saying is, if it's out on the property, it's 6 foot from wherever it's at grade and up. Wherever someone is standing next to that sign on constructed material or earth, it's 6 foot. So if it's inside, it's 6 foot. If it's on the second floor, it's 6 foot from wherever that person is standing next to the sign. I mean, I think that's the only way you could interpret that. It's not saying 6 foot. So in other words, once you go above 6 foot on the first floor, second floor is completely off the table. 6 foot above on the first floor is off the table. It's only at the first floor or out at existing grade. I think that's an unreasonable interpretation. It's just wherever you're standing next to a sign, it's 6 foot.
See, and I would say
Does that make sense?
6 feet from ground level, so that there wouldn't be signs up on second-story balconies.
So you are saying that there is a hard cap?
Yeah,
of 6 foot.
just my personal opinion, not
Yeah.
discussing the interpretation of what we already have. My personal opinion is, let's keep the signs on the ground.
But let's stick to the task, which is trying to give direction to the staff, whether the 6 foot is 6 foot above ground level or 6 foot from Josh's interpretation, which is from where you'd be standing, or a 6 foot sign, right? I mean, there's
All three of those.
You could put it up on a 10-foot pole and have it be 6 feet tall and not be any taller, right?
And I feel pretty comfortable on that one, because when we allow a 45-foot tall sign in a Arby's or something like that, clearly that's the top of the sign. So I think we feel pretty comfortable at measuring that.
The end of wherever it's, the end of the pole, the 10-foot pole, it's
where the
from
pole
measuring
enters the ground.
from the ground or finished floor elevation that it's starting from.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
Yeah.
but you make it sound like that's the only reasonable
Sure.
interpretation.
No,
And you're having a hard time even interpreting. I mean,
I just
Sure.
gave it a
Maureen's
shot.
is better. Right. Maureen's is.
And I agree. I think you
Seems
just
basic.
measure 6 feet from the ground, and we lose a couple of second-story signs. Darn, less signs. We already decided the signs may be a necessary evil, but nobody likes them, so put it in your yard instead of in your window.
But that creates a problem though, because if I'm at grade, if I'm at my house and I'm standing outside my house, I'm 6 feet tall, the sign can't go over here. But if I walk up the steps to go in my first floor house,
You can't put the sign.
and I want to put a sign in my front window, now it's above the 6, so is that what we're saying?
Yep.
If
Ground.
If you're,
Ground level.
so if your first floor level has to go up a couple steps, you can't put one in your front. The enforcement is a nightmare for that.
Oh, it's actually easier than yours.
Okay.
So you just walk around
Because
with
they'd have to
a
walk
sign
into the
saying
house
it's
to
above
see
it.
whether the sign is actually 6 feet from
I'm
where
not
they're at.
sure
and
that that's
then-
the right way to do it. I'm just saying,
No,
I think it's easier to tell.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah.
Can I add something that it's 1 o'clock in the morning?
We're doing pretty good to even
We'll
be
take your
thinking at
feedback
this time.
and
5 more minutes.
do something, and we'll just apply it fairly to everybody, and we'll try to make it clear with what it goes, so.
Thank you.
And this is maybe not, when we send this out, do you also say that you can't put signs in parking? Because that's what I was told, but people are doing that all the time.
Put signs where?
In the parking strip, the green parking strip.
Correct, yeah, because that's part of the public right-of-way, so.
Does it say that clearly? I didn't see that it did.
It does, so,
Just can't be in public.
no signs behind curb if there's no sidewalk, or.
State,
somewhere
city-owned
within there.
property, yeah.
Yeah, there's actually some nice restrictions, but
People don't,
people do
It
not
doesn't state
always
on
follow
this. I
them.
think I've rewritten something that states that a little more specific between the
because, yeah,
sidewalk and the
that
curb.
to me,
This
I mean,
talks about the
obviously
right of way.
it's- that doesn't cover it to me, well enough anyway.
So, yeah, they're fun issues, but we'll take your feedback and make a decision.
Well, I think it does, but I don't think people reading it say, understand it.
It does, but it doesn't.
We'll try to bring it down to a politician's level so they can understand.
Yeah, that's
That's
what's needed.
That's a really low level.
Below 6 feet?
No, understanding of politicians.
All right, when's our next meeting?
Other than that, we're.
No
still on a
offense to the
regular
current
schedule,
company.
So I believe June the
June
8th.
8th? June 8th?
Yep.
Mention this
All right,
earlier.
I move-
Just so you're aware, city council is not next Thursday.
Okay.
Postpone it till the following Tuesday.
Following Tuesday, so there'll be Tuesday commission, or council, and then Thursday commission that
I
same.
move we adjourn at 1 o'clock.
Wow, we have never done anything close to this before.